Klingon interrogator's blade flashed as it sliced into Captain Donald Sullivan's flesh, sending rivulets of crimson blood dripping onto the deck of the IKS Devastator. Sullivan gritted his teeth against the searing agony, refusing to break. He had to endure. Earth's survival depended on it. In the year 2257, the Galactic Klingon Empire had subjugated most of the known universe, leaving only a few pockets of resistance. Earth remained defiant, but its strength was fading fast against the Klingons' relentless onslaught. Outnumbered and outgunned, humanity's leaders resorted to a desperate gambit. They sent Sullivan, one of their greatest warriors, to be captured by the enemy. His mission, withstand the Klingons' torture long enough for Earth to position its hidden ace in the hole for a decisive strike. Sullivan had allowed himself to be taken on Rigel 4, and now he was trapped in the bowels of Devastator, at the non-existent mercy of the cruel Commander Wren. Wren yearned to rip the location of Earth's secret bases from Sullivan's mind, to enable the final conquest that would make the Klingon Emperor the undisputed master of the galaxy. Agony piled upon agony as Wren's ruthless methods escalated. But pain was nothing new for Sullivan. He'd been trained to resist, to endure, to die before he betrayed his people. And so he suffered in silence while far away, Earth Fleet made its move. The mighty Terra Fleet, christened in desperation and crewed by grizzled veterans, aimed to turn the tide with one swift stroke. Packing reverse-engineered Klingon tech and revolutionary weapons, the ships hurtled into Klingon space to sever the arteries of the Empire. Shipyards, supply bases, command centers, all would burn under the guns of Terra Fleet. If the ruse worked, if Sullivan held out long enough, the Klingons would reel from the blow. Perhaps they would even be forced to negotiate a peace. But if Sullivan broke, if the Klingons sniffed out the trap too soon, then Earth and all humanity would be doomed to an eternity of servitude. The battle to come would decide the fate of worlds, and Sullivan's anguished screams would be the whetstone upon which that future was ground. In the cold void of space, a trio of battleships materialized from the darkness, their arrivals heralded by shimmering distortions in the starfield. The Endeavor, defiant and valiant, dropped their cloaks, formations tight as they bore down on the unsuspecting Garrick's shipyards. On the Endeavor's bridge, Admiral Yoshida leaned forward in his command chair, eyes hard as he took in the serried ranks of Klingon battlecruisers arrayed before him, still under construction. "All ships, fire at will," he ordered, voice like steel. The Terra Fleet opened up as one, weapons ports flaring to life. Lances of searing plasma streaked from the Endeavor's cannons, punching through the unfinished hulls of the Klingon vessels and deep into the shipyard's innards. Gouts of flame blossomed in the vacuum, atmosphere and debris spewing from gaping wounds. The Defiant and Valiant added their own fury to the mix, antimatter torpedoes arcing out to slam into the space dock's reactor cores and command decks. Plumes of incandescent gas jetted from ruptured conduits as secondary explosions ripped through the superstructure. In scant minutes, the mighty Garrick's shipyards were reduced to a twisted mass of blackened metal, the smoldering husks of Klingon battlecruisers drifting in the wreckage. Admiral Yoshida allowed himself a tight smile. "Well done," he said softly. "Now let's see how the Klingons like a taste of their own medicine." Light years away in the bowels of the IKS Devastator, Captain Sullivan screamed. Commander Wren stood over him, her face a mask of cruel commitment as she worked the controls of the Mind Sifter. Agony poured into Sullivan's brain, white-hot and searing. He convulsed against his restraints, spine arching as his synapses overloaded. But he did not break. He retreated deep into his core, to that unassailable fortress of will at the heart of him. And there he endured, drawing strength from the knowledge that every second of torment brought Earth's salvation closer. Wren stepped back, frustration warring with grudging respect on her angular features. The human had resisted far longer than any prisoner in her experience. His mind should have shattered long ago under the sifter's probing. And yet still he defied her, keeping Earth's secrets locked behind a wall of iron purpose. She found herself almost admiring his sheer tenacity. On the bridge of the Devastator, Fleet Lord Karn seethed with barely leashed rage as he watched the sensor feed from Garrick's. The shipyards blazed in the darkness, the pride of his fleet burning to ash. How could the humans have struck so deep into Klingon space undetected? He rounded on his second-in-command, General Vectra, fangs bared. "Find that accursed Terra fleet," he snarled, "and destroy them." Vectra met her superior's glare without flinching. "My lord, the humans have shown they possess technology far beyond our reckoning. We must learn the extent of their capabilities before we—" "I will not cower before hairless apes," Karn cut her off, voice booming. "The Klingon Empire does not yield. It conquers." He swept a clawed hand toward the view screen. "Now do as I command, or I'll find someone who will." Vectra bowed her head in acknowledgement, even as unease coiled in her gut. The humans had just demonstrated they were far more dangerous than the High Command had assumed. Charging blindly after them invited disaster. But Fleet Lord Karn would not be swayed by caution. He would have his vengeance, even if it meant leading the Klingon war machine to ruin. Back on Earth, Dr. Amy Nakamura watched the news feeds with a mixture of hope and dread. The stunning victory at Garrix had electrified humanity, but Amy couldn't shake the sense of looming crisis. The support group she'd founded had grown to dozens of families, all bound together by love and fear for the crews of the Terra fleet. They gathered in person and online, offering comfort and solidarity. But beneath the brave faces, Amy saw the strain in their eyes, the unspoken knowledge that their loved ones were sailing into the fire. She understood all too well the price of hope. Deep in Klingon space, the Terra fleet moved like vengeful ghosts, cloaking systems engaged as they hunted their next target. In the Endeavor's CIC, Admiral Yoshida pored over star charts and Klingon comm intercepts, searching for weaknesses. Beside him, the fleet's captains waited grimly, knowing that each moment increased the risk of detection. They were running out of time. But on the ravaged deck of the IKS Devastator, time had ceased to hold meaning for Donald Sullivan. There was only the pain, the searing slice of Wren's blades, the relentless probe of the Mind Sifter. She no longer bothered with questions, intent only on breaking him. But he would not yield. He thought of Earth, of blue skies and cool breezes, of his oath to protect humanity despite the toll. And so he screamed his defiance into the uncaring void, buying precious seconds with his blood and agony. The battle for Earth's future raged on, out among the stars and in the crucible of his tortured flesh. How long he could hold out, he did not know, but he would make the Klingons pay dearly for every inch of ground. The confrontation had only begun, and Sullivan would endure until the very end. The Endeavor materialized from hyperspace, flanked by the bulk of Terra fleet. Kronos loomed before them, a rust-red orb wreathed in orbital defense platforms. Admiral Yoshida's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the tactical display. "Enemy fleet strength at 40% of projections," his XO reported. "The diversion worked." Yoshida nodded grimly. "Launch quantum missiles. Target military installations and government centers." Across the fleet, missile bays cycled open. Streams of sleek projectiles erupted from their launchers, arcing towards the Klingon homeworld. The defenders scrambled to respond, but it was too late. On the planet's surface, chaos erupted as explosions blossomed across military bases and command centers. The High Council chambers shook as nearby detonations shattered windows and cracked stone. In orbit, Klingon ships burned as Terra fleet pressed its advantage. But not all went according to plan. The Defiant and Valiant, leading the diversionary assault on Kronos' fortified moon, found themselves outgunned and overwhelmed. Captain Edward Nakamura of the Defiant barked orders as his bridge filled with smoke. "Concentrate fire on their flagship. We have to buy more time." The Defiant's phasers lashed out, carving glowing furrows in a Klingon battlecruiser's hull. But return fire hammered the smaller Earth vessel, breaching its shields. Nakamura gripped his chair as the deck bucked beneath him. "Hull integrity failing?" his helmsman shouted. "We can't take much more of this." Nakamura's fist tight. "Then we go down fighting. For Earth." The Defiant surged forward, ramming itself into the guts of the Klingon flagship. Both ships vanished in a blinding fireball. Aboard the IKS Devastator, Sullivan's world had narrowed to an endless cycle of agony and respite. He barely registered when Commander Wren entered his cell, her usual array of torture implements conspicuously absent. "Tell me, human," she said, settling into a chair across from him. What drives you to resist so fiercely? What makes your Earth worth such suffering? Sullivan's laugh was a dry rasp. You wouldn't understand, Klingon. Try me, Wren replied, leaning forward. Help me comprehend this devotion of yours. To Sullivan's surprise, he found himself responding. Their discussion ranged from philosophy to culture, punctuated by moments of genuine curiosity on both sides. As their debate stretched on, alarms blared through the Devastator. Wren's comm badge chirped urgently. Commander! A panicked voice crackled. The humans! They're attacking Kronos itself! Wren's eyes widened in shock. She cast a final, conflicted glance at Sullivan before racing from the cell. On Earth, Dr. Amy Nakamura's hands shook as she read the casualty report. The Defiant, lost with all hands. Edward, gone. Around her, other families wept or stared in stunned silence. They said it would be a simple diversion, one woman sobbed. How could this happen? Amy struggled to find words of comfort, even as her own grief threatened to overwhelm her. The price of their bold strategy was becoming all too clear. In the smoking ruins of the Klingon High Command, Captain Mitchell Wolfe and his Spartans moved like ghosts. They dispatched guards with ruthless efficiency, fighting their way towards the council chambers. General Vectra stood her ground as the humans burst in, disruptor raised. You dare assault the heart of the Empire? She snarled. Wolfe's grin was wolfish beneath his helmet. Oh, we dare! A furious firefight erupted. When the smoke cleared, Vectra and several other leaders were in restraints. But Fleet Lord Karn had slipped away in the chaos, leaving a trail of dead Spartans in his wake. Karn sprinted through secret passages, rage building with each step. He burst into an emergency command center, technicians scrambling to their feet. I want every ship, every warrior converged on Kronos, he roared. We will crush these human vermin once and for all. As Klingon reinforcements poured towards their homeworld, Admiral Yoshida faced a critical decision. They had struck a devastating blow, but at a terrible cost. Now they were in danger of being trapped if they stayed too long. Sir, his XO said quietly, our window of opportunity is closing, and we've lost contact with the Spartans. Yoshida's fingers dug into the arms of his chair. They had hurt the Klingons badly, but was it enough? And what of their people still behind enemy lines? The future of Earth hung in the balance as Yoshida weighed his next move. Admiral Yoshida's decision came swiftly. All ships, prepare for immediate withdrawal. We've struck our blow. Now we must evade the hammer. The Terra Fleet vessels shimmered and vanished, cloaking systems engaged as they slipped away from Kronos. But the cost had been high. The Defiant and Valiant were gone, their crews lost in the inferno of battle. As the fleet regrouped at their hidden base, the mood was somber. Captain Mitchell Wolfe and his surviving Spartans arrived with their high-value prisoners, including General Vectra. The intelligence they had gathered was invaluable, but it came with a deadly risk. Sir, the Klingon data modules, Wolfe reported, his face grim beneath the grime of combat. They may contain tracking algorithms. If Karn's forces crack the encryption... Yoshida nodded, understanding the implications. Then they'll find us. We need to move. The base erupted into controlled chaos as evacuation protocols initiated. Crews worked feverishly to load essential equipment and supplies onto the fleet vessels. In the command center, Yoshida conferred with his officers. Commodore Valdez, you'll take command of the decoy mission, he ordered. Use the armored section to draw their fire. Buy us time to establish a new operations base. Valdez saluted sharply. Understood, Admiral. We'll make them chase shadows. As the preparations continued, Dr. Amy Nakamura's voice crackled over the comms from Earth. Admiral, we've received a coded message. It's about Captain Sullivan. Yoshida's eyes widened. Put it through. The message was brief, but its impact profound. Sullivan was alive, still held aboard the IKS Devastator, but his condition was critical. Aboard that very ship, Commander Wren stood outside Sullivan's cell, her hand hovering over the control panel. The human screams had faded to ragged whispers, his once defiant spirit hanging by a thread. She entered, her usual instruments of torture conspicuously absent. Sullivan's eyes, sunken and glassy, tracked her movement. "Why?" he rasped. Wren's face was a mask of conflicting emotions. "Because there must be an end to this," she said softly. "Even in war." She deactivated the restraints, catching Sullivan as he slumped forward. As she eased him onto the floor, alarms blared through the ship. Fleet Lord Karn's voice boomed over the intercom. "All ships, battle stations. We have located the human base. Today, we crush their pathetic resistance." Wren's breath caught. She looked down at Sullivan, torn between duty and the stirrings of something she couldn't quite name. In the hidden Terra Fleet base, the evacuation reached its final stages. Commodore Valdez and his volunteer crew prepared to launch in the armored section, their Klingon prisoners secured. Admiral Yoshida watched from the bridge of the Endeavor as the decoy ship detached. "Godspeed, Commodore," he murmured. As the bulk of Terra Fleet prepared to depart, proximity alarms shrieked to life. A massive Klingon armada dropped out of warp, weapons blazing. "Evasive maneuvers," Yoshida barked. "All ships, execute emergency jump protocols." The space around the base erupted in a firestorm of energy weapons and torpedo barrages. Valdez's decoy ship plunged into the fray, drawing fire and buying precious seconds for the others to escape. Aboard the Devastator, Karn watched the battle unfold with savage glee. "At last," he snarled, "the end of humanity's futile resistance." But Commander Wren, still crouched in Sullivan's cell, felt only a growing sense of unease. The humans had proven far more formidable than anyone had imagined. And now, as the galaxy erupted in flames around them, she wondered if this war might consume them all. Weeks stretched into months as the Terra Fleet played a deadly game of cat and mouse with Karn's forces. The vast emptiness of space became their refuge, each jump taking them further from Earth, but closer to their ultimate goal. Admiral Yoshida stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of their latest hiding place. A desolate system, far from any charted trade routes. The crew worked in hushed tones, acutely aware that discovery could come at any moment. "Sir," his XO reported, "long-range sensors are picking up unusual activity in Sector 47. Yoshida's brow furrowed. "Show me." The display shifted, revealing a swarm of Klingon vessels converging on a distant point. At the center of their formation, a familiar energy signature pulsed. "It's the decoy," Yoshida breathed. "Valdez did it." Across the vast distances of space, Commodore Valdez and his skeleton crew watched as hundreds of Klingon warships materialized around them. The comm channels erupted with furious Klingon chatter as they realized they'd been duped. "Looks like the bait's been taken," Valdez said grimly. "Let's hope it was worth it." On the bridge of his flagship, Fleet Lord Karn snarled in frustration as reports flooded in. There was no sign of the Terra Fleet, only a detached section of their base and a handful of ships. "It's a trap," he roared. "All ships, battle form." His words were cut short as space itself seemed to ignite. The Terra Fleet decloaked in perfect firing position, their weapons already charged and locked on target. Admiral Yoshida's voice was cold steel as he gave the order. "Fire!" The Endeavor shuddered as it unleashed its full arsenal. Across the fleet, other ships followed suit. Streams of phased plasma and quantum torpedoes sliced through the unprepared Klingon formation. Explosions blossomed in the vacuum, the light of dying ships reflecting off their hulls. Klingon vessels, caught in the crossfire, erupted or drifted powerless. Aboard the IKS Devastator, alarms blared as the ship rocked under the human onslaught. Commander Wren raced through smoke-filled corridors, her mind racing. She skidded to a halt outside Sullivan's cell, decision made. The human captain barely stirred as she deactivated his restraints. His skin was waxy, his breathing shallow. Wren hauled him to his feet, supporting his weight. "Come on, human," she muttered. "You're my ticket out of here." They stumbled through the chaos of the dying ship, dodging panicked crew and bursts of plasma from ruptured conduits. Wren muscled Sullivan into a small medical shuttle, strapping him in before taking the controls. As the shuttle burst from the Devastator's hangar, Wren opened a channel to the Endeavor. "Human vessel, this is Commander Wren. I have your Captain Sullivan. Stand down your attack or he dies. On the Endeavor's bridge, Yoshida's face tightened as he processed Ren's words. He watched the tiny shuttle weave through the debris field, knowing the choice before him could alter the course of the war. "Lower shields," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let them through." The Terrafleet's energy barriers flickered and died. Ren's shuttle slipped past, aiming for open space. For a heartbeat, it seemed she might escape. Then space lit up once more as precision fire lanced out, catching the shuttle's engines. It spun, drive sputtering and dying. "Tractor beam," Yoshida commanded. "Bring them in." As the shuttle was drawn into the Endeavor's hangar, the battle raged on. Klingon ships burned and broke under the relentless assault. On his flagship's bridge, Karn bellowed orders, trying to salvage something from the disaster. A proximity alarm shrieked. Karn turned, eyes widening as he saw the Endeavor bearing down on them, weapons blazing. The last thing he saw was the flash of torpedoes streaking towards the bridge. In the aftermath, the system was a graveyard of broken ships and shattered dreams. The remnants of the once mighty Klingon armada limped away, hounded by Terrafleet pursuit vessels. Yoshida stood in the Endeavor's sickbay, watching as medics worked feverishly over Sullivan's battered form. In the next bed, Commander Ren lay unconscious, surrounded by armed guards. The doctor approached, his expression grave. "It's touch and go, Admiral, but he's fighting." Yoshida nodded, his eyes never leaving Sullivan. "Fight on, old friend," he murmured. "The war's not over yet." Admiral Yoshida stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of Kronos. The Klingon homeworld loomed large, a symbol of their enemy's power and resilience. "Open a channel to all Klingon frequencies," he ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The communication officer nodded, and Yoshida took a deep breath before speaking. "This is Admiral Yoshida of the Terrafleet. Your armada lies in ruins, your greatest warriors defeated. We offer you this chance. Return all human prisoners and cease hostilities within 1 week, or we will bring the full might of our forces against Kronos itself." He cut the transmission, turning to face his senior staff. "Prepare for any eventuality. They may surrender, or they may choose to go down fighting." On Kronos, the High Council chamber erupted into chaos as Chancellor Krask relayed the human ultimatum. Voices raised in anger, fear, and desperation as the Klingon leaders grappled with their new reality. "We must accept their terms," Krask thundered, banging his hand on the table. "Our fleets are decimated, our best commanders lost. We need time to rebuild." General Tirak, his face a mask of terrifying rage, leapt to his feet. "Never! We are Klingons. We do not surrender, even in the face of certain death. Let the humans come. We will show them the true meaning of war." The debate raged on, factions forming and tempers flaring. In the midst of the tumult, a junior officer burst into the chamber, his eyes wide with urgency. "Chancellors, generals, a human shuttle has breached our defenses and landed in the capital." Silence fell as the implications sank in. Then the doors to the council chamber swung open, revealing a battered but defiant figure. Commander Ren strode in, her Klingon uniform torn and bloodied, but her eyes blazing with purpose. "My lords," she said, her voice carrying across the stunned room, "I bring you the key to our victory." Back on the Endeavor, alarms blared as security teams raced to contain the breach. Yoshida arrived at the shuttle bay just in time to see the last shimmer of a transporter beam fading away. "Report," he barked. His security chief's face was grim. "It's Commander Ren, sir. She's gone, and she's taken detailed files on our tactical systems with her." Yoshida's blood ran cold as he realized the implications. He turned to his XO. "Get me Captain Sullivan, now!" But even as the words left his mouth, another alarm sounded. Sullivan's life signs had vanished from sickbay. On Earth, news of the ultimatum spread like wildfire. Crowds gathered in city squares, cheering and embracing as hope bloomed for the first time in years. Dr. Amy Nakamura found herself swept up in the jubilant atmosphere, tears streaming down her face as she hugged complete strangers. Yet amid the celebrations, a seed of unease took root. The Klingons had proven themselves cunning and ruthless foes. Would they truly surrender? Or was this merely the calm before an even greater storm? As the deadline approached, Chancellor Krask prepared to capitulate. Human prisoners were gathered, ready for transfer. But in the shadows of Kronos' mighty shipyards, General Tyrak and Commander Wren worked feverishly, poring over stolen data and formulating their desperate counterstrike. "Here," Wren said, pointing to a holographic display of the Terra fleet's position. "Their shields are weakest at these points. If we concentrate our fire from the orbital platforms and shipyards, we can cripple their flagship before they even realize what's happening." Tyrak nodded, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "And once their leadership is in disarray, we strike at Earth itself. You've done well, Commander. Perhaps there is hope for you yet." Wren's expression remained neutral, but her mind raced. She had come too far, sacrificed too much to fail now. As she finalized the attack plans, her thoughts drifted to Sullivan. Soon she would face him again, this time as his captor. The day of reckoning dawned. On the Endeavor, Admiral Yoshida watched the countdown tick away, tension coiled in every muscle. Just as he opened his mouth to order the final assault, the sensors exploded with activity. A tsunami of energy erupted from Kronos, catching the Terra fleet completely off guard. The Endeavor shuddered under the onslaught, shields failing and hull breaches spreading like cracks in ice. "Abandon ship!" Yoshida roared as consoles exploded around him. "All hands to escape pods." As the crew scrambled to evacuate, a Klingon boarding party materialized on the bridge. At their head stood Commander Wren, disruptor aimed squarely at Yoshida's chest. "Come with me, Admiral," she said, her voice cold. "You have a reunion to attend." In the chaos of the attack, few noticed a small stealth shuttle slipping away from the Endeavor. Inside, Captain Sullivan gritted his teeth against the pain of his injuries, pushing the craft to its limits as he raced towards Kronos. He had a score to settle with Wren, and perhaps a chance to end this war once and for all. Sullivan's shuttle screamed through Kronos' atmosphere, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. The small craft shuddered violently as it plummeted towards the planet's surface, its stealth systems barely holding against the onslaught of Klingon sensors. Inside, Sullivan gripped the controls with white-knuckled intensity. His body ached, wounds from his captivity still raw, but adrenaline pushed the pain to the background. He had one shot at this, and failure meant more than just his own death. The shuttle's sensors blared a warning. Sullivan's eyes widened as he saw a massive energy surge erupt from the planet's surface. The tsunami of destructive force slammed into the Terra fleet, catching them completely off guard. "No," he breathed, watching helplessly as the Endeavor's shields failed under the barrage. His calm crackled to life, filled with the panicked voices of the fleet. Sullivan's expression resolute as he heard Yoshida's order to abandon ship. He banked the shuttle hard, narrowly avoiding a piece of debris from a destroyed Earth vessel. As Sullivan neared his landing zone, the true scope of Tyrak's ambush became clear. Klingon ships swarmed from hidden shipyards, pouncing on the crippled Terra fleet. The skies above Kronos blazed with weapons fire and the death throes of human ships. Sullivan's hands flew over the controls, guiding the shuttle towards a small clearing near a heavily fortified compound. Just as he began his final approach, a disruptor blast caught the shuttle's wing. The craft spun wildly, alarms blaring as Sullivan fought for control. The ground rushed up to meet him. Sullivan braced for impact, his last conscious thought a prayer that he'd survive long enough to complete his mission. He awoke to the sensation of being dragged. His eyes fluttered open, vision blurry, to see two Klingon warriors hauling him across rough stone floors. Pain lanced through his body with each movement. "The human is awake," one of the Klingons growled. A boot connected with Sullivan's ribs, driving the air from his lungs. He gasped, struggling to focus as he was thrown into a dimly lit cell. "Welcome back, Captain," a familiar voice sneered. Sullivan looked up to see General Tyrak looming over him, a cruel smile twisting his features. Behind him stood Commander Wren, her face an unreadable mask. "I must thank you for delivering yourself so conveniently into our hands," Tyrak continued. "It saves us the trouble of hunting you down for your execution." Sullivan's eyes darted to Wren, searching for any hint of the alliance they'd formed. She met his gaze for a fraction of a second before looking away. "Get him on his feet," Tyrak barked. Rough hands hauled Sullivan upright. He swayed, fighting to stay conscious as Tyrak circled him predatorily. "You humans have proven more resilient than anticipated," the Klingon general admitted. "But your fleet lies in ruins, your homeworld defenseless. And now, Captain, you will serve a final purpose. Your public execution will crush whatever spark of resistance remains in your pitiful species." Sullivan's mind raced, searching for a way out. His eyes fell on another figure in the cell, a Klingon woman, her bearing proud despite her chains. She met his gaze, and Sullivan saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Recognition, a shared purpose. Before he could ponder it further, Tyrak's fist connected with his jaw. Sullivan's head snapped back, his vision swimming. "Take him to the interrogation chamber," Tyrak ordered. "I want to know everything about Earth's remaining defenses before we string him up." As the guards dragged Sullivan away, he caught one last glimpse of Wren. Her expression remained neutral, but he could have sworn he saw her hand move in a subtle gesture, one that looked suspiciously like a Terran military signal. Sullivan allowed himself a glimmer of hope. Perhaps all was not yet lost. The cell door exploded inward, showering Sullivan with debris. Through the smoke strode a figure in matte black armor, visor gleaming. "Captain Sullivan?" The Spartan's voice was filtered but unmistakably human. "I'm Captain Wolf. We're getting you out of here." Sullivan stumbled to his feet, adrenaline dulling the pain of his injuries. "There's a Klingon prisoner. We need to take her with us." Wolf nodded, gesturing to his team. They efficiently freed the Klingon woman, who introduced herself as General Vectra. "We have little time," Vectra growled. "Tyrak must be stopped before he can order my execution." The unlikely alliance moved swiftly through the prison complex. Alarms blared as they encountered pockets of resistance. Sullivan watched in awe as the Spartans moved with lethal precision, their augmented reflexes making short work of Tyrak's guards. Above, the sky lit up with streaks of plasma fire. The remnants of the Terra fleet pummeled Tyrak's strongholds, providing crucial air support for the ground assault. They rounded a corner to find Commander Wren dispatching the last of her own guards. She turned, disruptor leveled at the group. "Sullivan," she said, voice taut. "I suppose I shouldn't be surprised." "We don't have time for this," Sullivan replied. "Are you with us or against us?" Wren's eyes darted between Sullivan and Vectra. After a heartbeat, she lowered her weapon. "With you, let's end this." The expanded strike force fought their way toward Tyrak's command center. Spartan heavy weapons blasted through barricades, while Vectra's knowledge of Klingon tactics proved invaluable in outmaneuvering the defenders. They breached the final set of blast doors to find Tyrak waiting, surrounded by his most fanatical bodyguards. The general's eyes blazed with hatred. "Traitors and vermin," he roared. "You will die here." The room erupted into chaos. Disruptor fire crisscrossed with Spartan pulse rifles. Sullivan ducked and weaved, relying on his training and raw instinct to stay alive. He found himself back-to-back with Wolf, the Spartan's armor absorbing hits that would have vaporized an unprotected human. Together, they pushed forward, cutting through Tyrak's defenses. Vectra engaged Tyrak himself, their hand-to-hand combat a blur of strikes and counters. Sullivan saw an opening and lunged, tackling the Klingon general. Wolf was there in an instant, and together they subdued the struggling Tyrak. "It's over," Sullivan gasped, his body screaming in protest. "Order your forces to stand down." Tyrak snarled, but the fight had left his eyes. With trembling hands, he activated the command center's communication array. "This is General Tyrak," he began, defeated. "All Klingon forces, cease fire immediately." The words echoed across every frequency, and for a moment the sounds of battle fell silent. Then, from orbit, Admiral Yoshida's voice crackled through. "This is Admiral Yoshida of the Terra Fleet. We acknowledge your surrender. All hostilities will—" His transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by the sound of explosions. Sullivan's blood ran cold. "Yoshida!" he shouted into the comm. "Admiral, come in!" There was no response. Wren's face had gone pale. Tyrax loyalists, she said. They're making one last push. Sullivan turned to Wolf. We need to get to the Endeavor, now. The Spartan nodded, already coordinating with his team for emergency extraction. As they prepared to move out, Vectra approached Sullivan. Your Admiral's survival is crucial, she said. I will remain here to secure Tyrak and begin the process of unification. Go. Sullivan nodded his thanks, then followed Wolf and his team as they raced to save Yoshida, and perhaps the fragile peace they had just won. Sullivan's heart pounded as he raced through the corridors of the Endeavor, Wolf and his Spartan team close behind. The ship shuddered under renewed assault, and emergency klaxons blared throughout the vessel. They burst onto the bridge to find chaos. Consoles sparked and smoked, and crew members frantically worked to keep systems online. Admiral Yoshida stood at the center, barking orders and coordinating the defense. Admiral, Sullivan called out, what's our status? Yoshida turned, relief flashing across his face. Sullivan, thank God. We're barely holding together. Tyrak's loyalists launched a last-ditch assault. They've breached our outer defenses. A nearby display showed the desperate situation. Klingon warships swarmed around the crippled Terra fleet, targeting life support systems and engines. Sir, Sullivan said, his mind racing, I have a proposal. It's risky, but it might be our only shot. Yoshida nodded grimly. I'm all ears, Captain. Sullivan outlined his plan, detailing General Vectra's offer of alliance. As he spoke, Yoshida's expression shifted from skepticism to consideration. An alliance? With the Klingons? Yoshida's voice was incredulous. After everything they've done? Not all Klingons, sir, Sullivan countered. Vectra represents a faction that wants reform. With our help, they could overthrow Tyrak's remaining zealots and forge a new path. Another explosion rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed as more systems failed. We're out of options, Admiral, Wolf interjected. My team is ready to deploy. Give the word. Yoshida closed his eyes, weighing the monumental decision. Seconds ticked by as the battle raged outside. Finally, he opened them, tenacity etched on his face. Do it, he said. Coordinate with Vectra. We'll commit everything we have left. Sullivan nodded, already moving to action. He opened a secure channel to Vectra's flagship, confirming the alliance. Within minutes, the tide of battle began to shift. Vectra's loyalist ships broke from hiding, catching Tyrak's forces in a devastating crossfire. On the bridge of the Endeavor, crew members cheered as enemy vessels exploded under the combined assault. All ships, this is Admiral Yoshida, he broadcast across the fleet. We are now allied with General Vectra's Klingon faction. Coordinate your attacks and protect our new allies. Days blurred into weeks as the conflict spread across Klingon space. Sullivan found himself leading a mixed force of humans and Klingons, pushing back Tyrak's fanatics on a dozen worlds. The harsh winds of Geraz whipped sand against Sullivan's faceplate as he ducked behind a rocky outcropping. Disruptor fire sizzled overhead, scorching the stone. Wolf, he shouted into his comm. We need air support on the eastern flank. Roger that, the Spartan's calm voice replied. Moments later, the roar of engines filled the air as Terran dropships strafed enemy positions. Sullivan vaulted over his cover, leading the charge toward Tyrak's fortified bunker. Human and Klingon warriors fought side by side, an unthinkable sight mere weeks ago. They battled through layers of defenses, casualties mounting on both sides. Sullivan's armor was scorched and dented, his muscles screaming from exertion. But there was no time for rest. Finally, they breached the inner sanctum. Sullivan burst through the doors to find Tyrak, wounded but defiant. You fool, the general spat. You've doomed your entire species. Sullivan raised his weapon. It's over, Tyrak. Surrender. Never, Tyrak snarled. Humanity will never know peace as long as a single Klingon draws breath. In a blur of motion, Tyrak lunged. Sullivan hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden attack. He stumbled backward, Tyrak's blade slicing through his armor. A searing bolt of energy struck Tyrak mid-leap. The general's body crumbled to ash before it hit the ground. Sullivan turned to see General Vectra lowering her disruptor, her expression grim. You hesitated, she said. A warrior cannot afford such weakness. Sullivan nodded, wincing at his wound. Thank you, General. With Tyrak's death, the remaining hardliners quickly capitulated. But even as the immediate threat faded, new challenges loomed on the horizon. Aboard the Endeavor, now serving as the command center for the fledgling alliance, Sullivan stood with Yoshida and Wolf. They watched as Vectra addressed her people, declaring the formation of a new Klingon government. It's a new era, Yoshida mused, but we can't let our guard down. Wolf nodded in agreement. I've uncovered some disturbing information, sir. A group of Klingon nobles may have been secretly supporting Tyrak. Sullivan frowned. If that's true, this peace might be more fragile than we thought. As they discussed their next moves, a message came through. From Earth, the planet was celebrating the end of the war, but not everyone supported the alliance. Yoshida sighed heavily. We've won the war, but now comes the hard part, keeping the peace. Sullivan gazed out at the stars, pondering the challenges ahead. Humanity had thrown off its chains, but the responsibilities of their new role in the galaxy were only beginning to take shape. Sullivan's comm unit chirped urgently. Captain, report to the Admiral's ready room immediately. Exchanging a glance with Wolf, Sullivan hurried through the Endeavor's corridors. The ship hummed with tension, crew members speaking in hushed tones. Admiral Yoshida stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind his back. His reflection in the transparent aluminum revealed a face etched with concern. Sullivan, we have a situation, Yoshida said without turning. The interrogation of those Klingon nobles yielded disturbing information. Sullivan listened intently as Yoshida detailed the revelation of the Vieters, an ancient race puppeteering Klingon society from the shadows. His mind reeled at the implications. We've confirmed it, Yoshida continued, activating a holographic display. Scout ships found this in the Rillian Nebula. The image perseverance into a massive structure, all angular planes and pulsing energy conduits. It dwarfed anything in known space. My God, Sullivan breathed. What do we do? Before Yoshida could respond, the door hissed open. General Vectra strode in, her face a mask of impossibly strong fury. You've doomed us all, she snarled. The Viators will annihilate both our species for this transgression. We don't know that, Sullivan argued. Maybe we can... No, Vectra slammed her fist on the table. We must withdraw, sever all ties. It's our only hope of survival. Yoshida's voice cut through the tension. And what then, General? Live as cattle, waiting for the slaughter? Sullivan nodded. We can't unring this bell. Our only choice is to face them head on. Vectra's shoulders slumped. Then you condemn us all to extinction. Days blurred as plans were drafted and alliances tested. The combined human-Klingon fleet gathered in the shadow of a gas giant, cloaking fields masking their presence. On the Endeavor's bridge, Sullivan studied tactical readouts. Wolf stood nearby, his Spartans primed for boarding actions. This is insanity, someone muttered. Sullivan couldn't disagree. They were about to challenge a civilization so advanced it might as well be magic. But the alternative, continued subjugation, was unthinkable. All ships report ready, Admiral, the COM's officer announced. Yoshida nodded grimly. Signal the fleet. Execute jump on my mark. Sullivan's grip tightened on his console. History pivoted on this moment. 3, 2, 1, mark. Space twisted as the fleet surged into FTL. When they emerged, the Rillian Nebula's swirling gases filled the view screen. At its heart loomed the Viator station, somehow even more imposing in person. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then alarms blared as energy signatures flared across the station's surface. Incoming, the tactical officer shouted. Beams of coherent light lanced out, slicing through shields as if they weren't there. Ships disintegrated under the barrage. Evasive maneuvers, Yoshida ordered. All ships concentrate fire on those weapon emplacements. The Endeavor shuddered as it unleashed its full arsenal. Sullivan watched in awe as Klingon warbirds dove into the fray, disruptors blazing. A massive explosion rocked the station as a coordinated strike found its mark. A cheer went up from the bridge crew. It died in their throats as the damage seemed to unmake itself. In seconds, the emplacement was whole again. Impossible, Vectra whispered. Before anyone could respond, a new presence made itself known. A hologram coalesced in the center of the bridge, a being of swirling light and geometric patterns. You have exceeded your parameters, it intoned in a voice like grinding stone. Your rebellion is unexpected. Sullivan stepped forward, heart pounding. We are not your pawns. We demand. The being's form pulsed. You demand nothing. You exist at our sufferance. Yoshida joined Sullivan. Then why allow us to develop at all? Why not simply destroy us? For a moment, the hologram was silent. When it spoke again, there was an undercurrent of curiosity. You have potential. We seek to understand it. The being's form began to fade. Return to your worlds. We will consider your actions. With that, it vanished. The attacking beams ceased, leaving the battered fleet adrift in stunned silence. Sullivan turned to Yoshida, seeing his own mix of relief and trepidation mirrored in the Admiral's eyes. They had survived, but at what cost? And what would the Viator's judgment bring? As the fleet limped home, Sullivan knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never be the same.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.